Hello ladies and gentlemen, Richard here, the creator of the Top Hat Gaming Man. Obviously today we've had the announcement that the Nintendo Switch Lite is set for a release, and being somewhat of a handheld connoisseur, I decided it would be a good idea to give my point of view on this little device. Over the years I've been quite vocal, I suppose, on my opinions of the Nintendo Switch, and in the early days of the system's life cycle I suppose my opinions were somewhat even negative, which for some reason seemed to quite annoy people, which I always found quite strange. Like, surely if you like the Switch, fair enough. If I do not like the Switch, that's also fair enough. However, what I also said in those videos back then, that in all likelihood my opinion would change over the years, as obviously one of the greatest flaws with the Switch in the beginning, like with all consoles, was the system's extreme lack of a decent library. For at least the first year, all we seemed to get were mainly ports on the system. However, there was more issues than that, which I didn't quite like with the Switch originally. However, my opinions have evolved somewhat over the last few years. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about the Nintendo Switch Lite. When the original Nintendo Switch came out, I was actually travelling the world at the time. I'd just come off the back of a long trip to Greece, and then I went around the United States for 3 months, covering 25 different states. I then went to Canada, and I popped home for Christmas, and overall I was having a really good time. Had a lot of time playing with my 3DS and my PlayStation Vita, along with quite a few retro handhelds as well, because that's when I first started filming the series handhelds around the world. So when I found out that the next Nintendo console was going to be a hybrid handheld, I couldn't be happier. Handhelds are my bag, baby, if that's a good reference for you. But yes, handhelds. Fantastic. So Nintendo Switch. I was still travelling when it came out. I believe it was February 2017, just after my birthday, when the Nintendo Switch was finally released. And I was actually in a country where the Switch never even came out. In fact, I was in Thailand at the time, which is not part of Nintendo's cycle of countries they release their platforms in, which I would gather is down to their opinions on piracy, blah blah blah, where more people in Thailand prefer to pirate software than actually buy it. From what I could see, there was actually stores I came across regularly over there which simply sold burned copies of PlayStation 3 and Xbox One games, or 360 actually I think it was. So yeah, the Nintendo Switch, I found somewhere who was stocking them within 2 days of the system being released, and sadly I had to pay £100 premium. I think I paid about £400, £450 for the Switch, just because I really wanted to experience Breath of the Wild, and obviously also because I was away from home I couldn't play it on my Wii U either, so I needed this handheld to try Breath of the Wild. Sadly, when I got it though, as a handheld I wasn't too happy. I didn't really enjoy Breath of the Wild simply because it wasn't your typical Zelda experience. It felt to me like a very sandboxy game, and overall I'm not much of a fan of sandbox style games, but that's irrelevant in the issue today. What I didn't like about the Switch at the time was, firstly, its dreadful battery life. If you're playing one of the big titles like Breath of the Wild, the battery tends to only last for about 2.5 to 3 hours, and that's all you're going to get. After Thailand, I went on to Cambodia for a month, and after Cambodia I went on to Australia. And obviously Cambodia to Australia is a long trip. You're on the plane for quite a long time. And if I'm only getting 2 hours on my handheld, or 2.5 hours, that's not a very good experience, and I soon found myself falling straight back into using the 3DS as a handheld instead for several years, just because it functioned so much better as a handheld. I got hours and hours out of my DS or 3DS in comparison. And on top of that as well, the game library, it had been around for years, so it was huge. And you've got the Wii U as well. I enjoyed the Wii U, and I procured every major title that was released on the system during its life cycle and played through all of them. So for a good year or even 2 years, when most of the games that are coming out on the Switch are literally old Wii U games, which you can get for £10 on the Wii U, and suddenly for some reason people are paying £60 to get them on the Switch instead, I found that somewhat puzzling as a Nintendo consumer. It hadn't given me many reasons to enjoy the system. Firstly, like I said, the battery was extremely hindered compared to the 3DS, and I'd already completed all of the games anyway that was coming out on the system, so there was only a few what I even wanted to play at the time on TV mode as opposed to handheld mode. Like, I got through Breath of the Wild, even though it was on the Wii U as well. At least it came out simultaneously. You had Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which was also a decent exclusive, and I believe there was Splatoon 2 as well, which wasn't my cup of tea. Overall, over the last few years though, my opinions have changed drastically on the Nintendo Switch. I now really enjoy the system. Now it's got a proper fleshed out library. I guess that's partially down to how popular the system is and the amount of people who've purchased them. There's now a lot of games released on it. There's still the issue where many of the games are just ports of old 360 games and PS3 games and indie games that have been available on Steam for years. However, at least they're on somewhat of a handheld, so that is something new. Like, the Wii U games are fresh in my mind. Some of these games I've never played. I haven't played everything on the 360 and PS3. So there's more for me being released now than there was, say, back then when the Wii U was only just finishing off. So Nintendo Switch, didn't like it, poor battery, lots of ports, and also the size. If you're travelling around, having a handheld that big is more of a hindrance than it is a handheld, I suppose. It's too big to fit in your pocket. And with a screen that large, I found it very easy to get it scratched as well. So I came up with an innovative contraption where I just decided to keep it inside one of my socks instead. So after the first few scratches, I put it in a sock. So at least I resolved that problem. But I did not detract from the fact that I had to carry around a large piece of equipment which was fairly fragile with a short, pathetic battery life. So as a handheld, pretty poor. However, I can see why it's popular because the library of games is slowly getting better, and I'm sure it'll probably go down in history as a pretty good Nintendo system. It's only a few years in so far, and it's probably got another 4 or 5 years left in its life cycle, so we'll probably look back at this video, well I will anyway, and say yeah, the Switch, it was pretty brilliant. However, I think the first couple of years they've been turbulent for myself. The Switch Lite though, is it everything I want in a handheld? Well, partially. Some of the elements I like about it, some of them I don't, which I suppose just makes me a pretty reasonable human being. We have the battery life problem still. That hasn't changed whatsoever. For some reason, this new variant of the Switch offers the same battery life as the other one, even though it's supposed to only function as a handheld. So with a battery life of only 2.5 hours on the main titles, that's not very good for a handheld. However, at least this version of the Switch is going to be a lot cheaper than the old one, $100 I believe in America. I've not seen the European trailer yet, or the UK one, so I do not know what the difference in pricing is going to be in my region. However, I would hope that it is somewhat similar. Next we've got the form factor. Yes, the form factor does look much better on the Switch Lite than it did on the original. It looks smaller, and more importantly, it's not got 2 horrible Joy-Con devices attached to it. I bloody hate those things. It's going to feel like a solid device in your hand rather than something that's going to fall apart and break at any moment. That's at least how it looks in the trailers to me anyway. So we've got a better size, however the battery life is not fixed. And we've got a cheaper price point. So you've got 2 pros and 2 cons to it. So with regards to yourself buying one, I suppose it all depends on your circumstances. If you do not own a Switch yet, it would depend on whether you prefer gaming on a handheld or gaming on a TV. Obviously, if you prefer a TV, you're going to go for the expensive model. But if you're like myself and you've not got that much time to sit around a house playing games, then a handheld's obviously better for you, especially if you're going to pay a much lower price point than with the traditional Nintendo Switch. So I guess whether the Nintendo Switch Lite's worth buying all depends on your circumstances. Personally, I reckon I probably will be getting one anyway, despite the fact I do have a Nintendo Switch, and that's not just because I've been a mad collector over the years. It's mainly because I have a wife, you know, and she likes gaming as well. And if we're going travelling together, which we are, we're off to Greece for 9 weeks as of 2 weeks' time, it would be great to have 2 Nintendo Switches, one for me, one for her. Don't really care who uses which one, but it would just be good to have a second Switch and paying a much smaller price point, which would be lovely, I suppose. So I'm getting one just so we can have 2 Switches in the household, or not the household, the travel hold, or whatever you would call a citizen of Earth such as myself. Apart from that as well, sadly I'm not going to actually get to experience it in that 9-week trip to Greece. I'm going to have to get to experience it on my trip after that, because I'm going off, as some of you have probably heard, to film Handhelds Around the World Forever and live off this YouTube channel, which should be jolly good fun. So over the next 9 weeks in Greece I'll get to play a lot of the Nintendo Switch, and on my trip post that, which will begin in October, that's when I get to bring the Switch Lite with me and see whether this thing actually does live up to the expectations. So you'll get to see how both devices function on the go on this channel. Hopefully I'll be playing the Switch Lite over in Portugal for a month, which should be jolly good fun. So overall, is the Nintendo Switch worth buying today? Like I've already said, it all comes down to your personal circumstances. So for me, being a family man, it will certainly be worth it, especially as my son gets older as well, and he'll probably want to get his grubby little mitts over it when he puts on a couple more years. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am Richard, the Top Hat Gaming Man, and I will see you soon. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section on the Nintendo Switch Lite.
Born in London in '86, a stachio gent named Richard Parliament. He loves to wrestle, but he loves one more thing: handhelds round the world. He fights in his comments and he argues with fans. It's a problem no one understands. If there's two things he loves, it's gaming and handhelds round the world. Drinking fine wine, fighting fanboys, handhelds round the world.
Top Hat Gaming Man.